career. And her platform is what I would always called my secret weapon for any activation that I was doing. If I wanted it to succeed and I wanted it to hit those numbers, this was a secret weapon that I went to. So Hope, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away. I would love for you to maybe just start off. I know you can give a better introduction to your wonderful career than I just did, and maybe start there. And then I know she's got some slides that she's going to share with us, and just know questions are very welcome, you all, and I'll be looking for those in chat. Hi, Hope.
Hi, Lisa. I don't think I can beat that introduction. I can give a little bit more background, but you're always the sweetest when you introduce me. So starting off with my background, right out of school, I went and worked for a very large SaaS company, primarily on their partnerships and sales team, and learned very, very quickly that I wanted to get into the startup world. I didn't know necessarily what that meant. I think I believed at the time it was with the mindset of I want to be behind a company and working for a company that is at the forefront of innovation in any field that it was in. And so I joined at that time, and this is about 9 years ago, influencer marketing agency. And if you think back to, for some of you, what influencer meant 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was really just celebrity endorsements. The word influencer marketing was just starting to be something that I think was brought up by CMOs. The MarTech CMOs weren't really existing at that point. And it was a pretty much blank canvas for what brands wanted to do and how they wanted to work with them. So that was a really exciting time for me. I was there for 4 years. During that time, we were acquired by a pretty large company, the New York Times. And I stayed on for an additional 2 years working as kind of the lead strategy liaison for their entire sales team. This was interesting because I was arming their sales team, many of which who had been there for 10, 20, 40 years selling print, how to talk about social, how to talk about digital, and how to talk about influencer. Great experience. But again, I kind of found myself after a certain point wanting to get back into a startup, and then also a startup that was really focused on technology primarily in advertising. And that's how I found Social Native, the company I'm currently at and have been for 4 years. I'm the VP of Growth and Brand Partnerships. And even in the 4 years that I've been here, I have probably seen almost 3 cycles of what feels like a different company, simply because the rate at which the technology, but both we've developed, but also our category specifically, is rapidly changing. And so to be a part of a company that I think is using, and I know a big focus or a topic for today is AI and machine learning, but really incorporating that in every single touch point that we do, from social to e-commerce to just content creation in general. So I will go in and share my screen and kind of share what we're currently working on. I have actually some slides that speak to our product roadmap, so things that are coming out end of this quarter and next quarter, which Lisa, I'm sure will be fun for you to see. And I will say too, the interesting piece, and this ties to kind of how I think about, Social Native's immediate category, was about 1.5 years ago during COVID, we acquired a formerly large, very, very massive, well-known company in the e-commerce space. Now, we, up until that point, were really focused on social, creating UGC content through the lens of technology and automation for brands to use on their organic channels and paid social, digital marketing touch points, but never really dabbled in the e-commerce world so much. And the acquisition, while it may sound a little bit abstract, makes a ton of sense, because again, we're just seeing consumer consumption habits change. We're seeing how brands want to engage with their consumers. And now I think the e-commerce teams, primarily because they are so driven by ROI and visuals, are playing catch up a little bit to what the social platforms are doing. That's where so many of us and consumers discover brands, products, services, things are shared. And oftentimes when you sit in that social ecosystem and click to a brands.com, you immediately saw maybe their corporate side showing a little bit. And so the company that we purchased is essentially, and you can picture this if you're shopping online, you're looking at a product and you see almost this carousel or window of what looks like maybe Instagram, in some cases TikTok content. That's actually our widgets, our real estate, and we're able to use the content that we're either creating or content directly from a brand's consumer base to showcase that UGC content on site. And we're seeing that real estate not only cover more and more products, PDP pages, But we're also seeing that real estate expand. So the idea is so that when you're shopping online, whether it's on a brand's platform, their e-commerce arm, or if Meta is pushing you to do a live shopping event and they want you converting on their platform, the look and feel is very much driven by UGC. And essentially at the end of the day, that's what we're creating.
Love it. Love it, Hope.
So I'll present my screen. Lisa, you tell me when you can see.
Sure. Okay, I can see it.
All right, let me get this up and let me hide everyone. So if there are questions, I know Lisa said, please don't be shy. She knows that I'm all for questions. I think if you have an idea or question, certainly others on the call will. We or I don't have everything figured out too. So if you have ideas or things that you want to collaborate or discuss more, absolutely, I want to make sure we have time for that. But in terms of what I want to share with this team is, kind of high level where I see social native fitting within our category, but then a deeper dive into how are we actually solving, I think one of the most common problems in digital marketing, and that's content creation, but not just content itself for the sake of content's sake, but content that's actually going to resonate and work within whatever placement or whatever audience you put it in front of.
I love it.
Is this big enough for you to see, Lisa?
It is.
Okay, I may go screen just so it's, there's probably some laptops here. So I touched on this a little bit, but I think if I take social native out of the equation and I take a lot of the startups that are challenging the category right now and just take a step back and look at our immediate category from an advertising perspective, I do just want to call out that, even in my short 10 or 11 years in the category, there's been a significant amount of changes. So there's the move towards, away from out of home now to digital. What does digital really mean? Is digital static? Now we're seeing a massive evolution and focus into short form video in a number of different platforms, and some of those platforms are emerging every single day. And so what that means for, social native, but more so the brands that I get to work with, it means one, they're never going to have enough relevant content. And two, how do they even understand what relevant content is going to be if it is a new platform, if it's a new placement, if they're going after a new audience? And so being able to keep up with all of those changing behaviors from the consumer side, but then also the changing just increase in volume. We're swiping on our phones and looking at images and videos and brand content, probably 100 or 200x what I was doing 15 years ago. And so that's a lot of pressure for advertisers, but that's also a lot of pressure for the partners that work with them. And the only way that we would be able to keep up and arm our clients with enough creative that's going to be impactful is through technology. And so when I say content creation, creators, influencers, UGC, all of that is being done within the social native platform or ecosystem that we've built. So I would think of it, just to oversimplify, kind of like an Airbnb or an Uber for UGC content. And what I mean by that is we as social native employees do not actually own any production equipment. We're not shooting videos. We're not making ads. Instead, we've spent our time and energy and resources into building the platform that allows brands to connect with influencers, to connect with photographers, to connect with their consumers or potential consumers. And then we help facilitate the whole process for that content creation. And then in sometimes distribution. Distribution can be, we work with a creator, they push it out on their TikTok channel, or we work with a short form videographer and they're producing 10 different short form videos for Perrier to use on their TikTok channel. And so again, being able to have all of our, not just work and content live within a platform, but the performance data that comes with that allows us to start to build learnings and insights, to start to make predictions, start to use machine learning and then the evolution to AI to say, not only do you need short form videos on TikTok that are this length with this type of consumer in the content, but also you need to have 30% of the image be purple. You need to have branding brought up 4 times versus 5. So we get to start to A/B test what works for any given brand and placement, and then use that over time to have a feedback loop. So ideally the content gets more and more impactful. And everything I should just note, all of the visuals in here are social native created, meaning that we had creators generate this content for brands. There's obviously been a massive evolution. A lot of this creative is static, but right now, and I think this is not unique to social native by any means. Every brand is putting a bigger emphasis on video content. Video content inherently is a lot more cumbersome and tricky to produce. It's longer. It takes a significant amount of time to review against maybe some brand standards or safety best practices. So again, being able to have all of our content generation through a tool versus maybe a traditional agency would allows us to create content very, very quickly and pivot and learn from what is or isn't performing, and then feed that information back into our platform to maybe change the guidelines, maybe change the demographic information around who we're targeting from a consumer perspective, maybe change the messaging. And again, I think, you know, the rate at which the need for content is evolving and the rate at which the platforms are developing different outlets for even any of us to go and engage with brands or friends or family or companies that we love, that is only going to keep increasing. And I think there's going to be a significant amount of pressure for brands and companies in the space that aren't thinking about AI or not even thinking about machine learning to either play a massive game of catch up or reinvent themselves completely.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of fly through some of these. I did want to make sure that there's some additional background on more of the tactical work that we're doing. And Lisa, I'm happy to share this with you as a follow-up if anybody wants to reference back. There's a lot of information here, and I know we only have so much time today, but I did want it to be a resource potentially for anybody on this call to use going forward.
Awesome.
So how do we do this? I've talked a lot about a platform. I've talked a lot about content creators, but essentially, instead of building an influencer or creative agency, we built a tech stack that allows us to input content, input creative data, audience data, and performance data through, if we're talking about social for this case, API integrations with all the social platforms, and use all of that to essentially build on a brand specific basis best practices, and then also give data-driven insight around how to create more of that top performing content and how to optimize out maybe content that isn't performing above benchmark in whatever placement they're using it. And ultimately, because we're doing so with technology and a lot of automation, we're able to scale. If we weren't doing it with tech and we weren't doing it with automation, you know, working on a program where we need to generate 200 images or 200 videos from a brand's consumer base would be almost impossible. And we're using machine learning and AI in a few different places within our kind of product suite, if you will, that we give to the market. So I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail kind of as we go through. So I mentioned that we did acquire the company formerly called Olaplex, and that's really what we deem as our earned content. So think about our earned content product as I'm Nike, and I have thousands of consumers any given day sharing pictures of new sneakers, sharing pictures of them working out. All of that content is primarily being shared in social. And so we have technology that allows us to set up what we call collectors to go out and actually find all of that content in social that, you know, Nike's been tagged in. Maybe they're using a campaign hashtag that Nike's really pushing for Q2. So we can go out and actually collect it. And then we have a moderation team and AI that is actually sifting through and looking at all of those images and videos to say, yes, this meets, you know, Nike's specific need for this product SKU. Or aesthetically, it's well lit. You can see the brand. You can't see any other brand IPs. So we're going through, and in any given day, hundreds of thousands of images and videos are being essentially approved, partially by humans to start that machine learning if it's maybe a new client, and then primarily with machine learning and now AI to make sure that any piece of Nike content that makes it on their .com is within what their expectation is for what their consumers see. And I think we're only going to see this more. I think shopping online, you know, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, reviews were kind of that social validating piece that, yes, I want to buy this size, or yes, I love how this is styled, or I know that's not going to fit me because that model is 5'7" and I'm 5'2". And I think that review piece was really helpful. And now we're just seeing the written review carry a lot less weight. It certainly helps from an SEO perspective, but the visual reviews, so seeing how someone styles a product in their home, seeing how something looks outside when it's well lit versus what that fabric material is inside, the visual content is really replacing the written review. And again, written reviews are a lot easier to train AI to scrape for. The visual reviews, there's a lot of tools out there, but being able to have our own tech stack that is able to approve and moderate that content has been a huge, huge capability and a big win for us. Next is our creator content bucket, and this is really where social native kind of got our start about 9 years ago. And that's really our marketplace of creators who are producing and generating net new images and videos for brands based on a brand's ask. So think about it as essentially a call to our marketplace, which is about 2 million creators globally, to say, hey, I'm Nike. I just launched this new line of gym shorts and I don't have any earned content coming in from consumers because it just hit stores. Now I want to go create net new assets that have the gym shorts styled on all different body types, all different use cases, whether it's on a basketball court or at home watching Netflix. I need that content. And so we can go out and brief in our marketplace to create those assets net new based on their parameters. And then distribution and professional content are kind of tied together. And the reason for that is when we say distribution, there's a few different avenues in which we can help brands distribute content to their audience. The first is through influencers organically sharing. The second is through media support behind those influencer posts, whether it's whitelisting, boosting. Obviously, Meta and Instagram are really pushing branded content, but then also where else should that content be living? Is it going to be pulled and used maybe in email marketing sequences? We have Zillow, who's a client, and they're actually using short form video content shot on iPhones on TV spots. So just thinking about different places where UGC is now starting to take over, where traditionally maybe a creative agency would come in and shoot a massive, massive production set just to create one asset. Now we can do that via hundreds of people in just a matter of days. And then professional content. This is, professional photographers, professional videographers, because there's certainly still a need for that level and quality of content. But we also have professional videographers and photographers who can edit content. So as a content marketing partner of all the major social platforms, but primarily Meta, we have individuals who are briefed on social best practices for ad units on their platform. And so again, through our technology, we can essentially match editors based on a brand and the ask and have them create best practice ad units that then again, through our API, we can see, okay, this is your benchmark. This is the social native content you ran. Here's maybe your top 3 performing assets. What do we know through technology is telling us those assets are performing better? Is it who created them? Is it how the content shot? Is it visually what's captured in the creative? Is it the speed? Is it the sound? And so using all of those learnings to then go back to our editors and in some case creators to drum up more assets that are more similarly aligned to their top performing. So I talked fairly high level about our earned tooling, but I do think it's helpful just to see a couple of different places for our earned product where we absolutely have to have machine learning and AI to help us do this. So we're lucky enough to work with some of the largest advertisers in the world. And those advertisers and brands have on any given day, maybe 20 different websites per global markets. So we work with a team at Adidas. They have their Korea team. They have all of the different countries that they're live in, each of which need content that's relevant for that specific country and language. And so again, when we're going out and identifying content that has their product showcased from consumers, we are then looking at it on a market basis and then also a brand basis. Again, we're using that from machine learning and AI to help us sift through all of that creative daily so that they can start to repurpose it and use it. We also are using machine learning and AI around how and what content is displayed on site. So some of our clients who have been with us for years and years now, they have UGC content on almost every PDP or almost every landing page where their consumers are going to hit their website. Now it's really about, we have the coverage. How do we know what UGC content to put there? Sure, if it has the gym shorts in it, that makes it top of the list for that specific SKU. But do we show the male content? Do we show the female content? Do we show content that's very clearly shot during the summer or, when someone's running to their car in the winter? And so we're using machine learning AI to understand of those maybe 5 images or videos, what is the top performing in terms of click-throughs, conversions. If somebody clicks into that image, are they now discovering and spending a significant time on site? Are they actually converting and moving their items to their shopping cart to checkout? How big is their shopping cart? And again, that's even just as simple as changing the images and videos that are in the carousel, but then also the people who are creating it, they also need to be in line with who the end consumer is that's touching those galleries. And then we do have some pretty significant technology integrations just to make sure that the content that we're syndicating to the brands.com and then maybe potentially other partners. So if you think about it like a Clinique, for example, they have their e-commerce site, but they sell their mascara in Sephora. They sell it in different department stores. They're actually syndicating user-generated content that we've sourced and mined for them to those other partners. So we have technology that then informs those shoppable galleries to make sure that the top performing content is always displayed and then it's refreshed based on that window of time that we're seeing it be effective. And then enterprise structure, a little bit less around technology here, other than building the framework for us to support global teams in markets where we candidly don't even have support teams or offices. And again, that's being done a lot through either bots, our offshore teams, and then building specific tech stacks through integrations with the brands API to make sure that there's no downtime, because we know that even if a brand has their office hours, consumers are on their site at any given time, and we just need to be able to support that from an enterprise, but really a global structure. And I'll breeze through these. I did want to share some visuals around what it looks like kind of for the flow of the content in the customer journey, and then also internally at Social Native. So again, just collecting content from consumers, moderating that, and then asking for rights, and then all the different places that it could be activated. So it's not just e-commerce when you're shopping online. I think most of us probably do more shopping on our phones than we like to admit. But then also all of those other digital touch points. So whether it's an email, whether I'm on Sephora and I'm actually clicking into Clinique's mascara, or I'm asking a friend on Instagram, what was that? I can't see what that label was. How are you using it? Did you use a primer? So just thinking about all the different touch points from a visual and digital perspective where that content could and should be relevant. And then probably the most important piece is just our ability to analyze each of those different moments, because a piece of content that performs incredibly well on, say, an email marketing push may never work if it's on a brand's website, or it may never, ever work if it's coming organically from a brand's, say, TikTok account.
We've got some good questions, Hope, whenever you're ready to take some questions. Okay. Yeah. So the first question that we have here is from Janae, and she says, you mentioned collectors who aid in getting the data you need. I was wondering how big the teams of collectors are and what the qualifications to be one are. It sounds like a really interesting research job.
It is an interesting research job, and I would almost bet that you'd be more interested in kind of almost the overseeing of those teams, primarily the role of the individuals who are starting to train the tool and build that machine learning capability. There are offshore teams. So they're looking at images and videos all day long, which is really fun to a certain point. But there are executives on our team that are working with them to understand just nuances around, okay, now Reels are a big focus of Instagram because of TikTok. How do we train our offshore team to look at that content, and then as a byproduct, train our tooling and tech stack to start to look at that video in a very different way than, say, an in-feed video that's maybe a little bit more polished. Maybe it's not cut down so much. There may be less graphics or overlay. So it's definitely an interesting role just because of the nature of the platforms and how quickly the assets are changing. Our offshore team is about 40 individuals, and we look at them as a hybrid between operations and engineering team that work with them directly. That's only 4 people. And so if you think about the volume of content that's coming in daily, tens of thousands of images and videos, pretty interesting role to get to say, this is how we want to look at this asset type. We know because Facebook or Meta is letting us know that something else is coming. How do we prepare for that? Because the volume of content that's going to come in as a byproduct of having some of the largest brands with our collectors, it's a pretty interesting dynamic job. And if you have more questions about, even tactically, how do you look for a role like that? What does their day-to-day look like? I'm happy to connect after this too.
Awesome. And just on that note, I think that there would probably be some interest maybe in some of the students becoming content creators for you guys, because they're all, out there doing all this stuff. And so I posted a link, everyone, to the creator site, like how to become a creator for Social Native, and they do get paid. So Hope, talk to the just for a minute about kind of being a content creator for Social Native, what that looks like, what you're looking for, get the students kind of up to speed on that side of it.
Yeah, actually, that's perfect because I can hop into our creator platform.
Yeah. Yay.
And so to be a social native creator, it's pretty easy, but it does include a lot of data collection on our side. So in order to be a creator, you go online and you can apply on our site. And really what that application is us trying to understand from a demographics, from a psychographics, and just an overall personal level, who each individual is. So we're going to be looking at essentially your social handles and platforms that you submit to us. So if you say, I want to be a creator on TikTok, but I don't want to do it on Instagram, we'll look at your TikTok and we'll say, okay, this is great. We're seeing a consistency around a lot of, I'm making this up, recipe content. Obviously, there's an inherent talent here. We think it probably would make sense, and this is machine learning and now AI, to put you in more of a food and bev recipe focus. Maybe it's cocktails, other things, bucket. We're also collecting first party data from every creator to say, tell us who you are, tell us what types of brands you're passionate about, tell us what types of content you like creating, tell us if you're, a student, where you're going to school, what are you studying, things like that. And that's what we use to match creators with any given campaign or project. And that's one of our proprietary tech pieces. And the reason why that's so valuable is, to Lisa's point, we are compensating and paying each creator for any asset they produce, but we're not paying, the Kim Kardashians of the world. We're not paying creators $20,000 to create an image, because we inherently don't want those images. We want content from people who love Nike. They're excited because they're releasing a new running shoe, and they want to be first in line to not only have the shoe, but also talk about it. And so because we put so much onus on that data collection and then the matching of creators, we're able to create much more authentic, much better content quality, essentially, because these are individuals who are passionate about the programs that they're working on. And if it's a brand new brand or a brand new product that they don't know about, it's also a discovery tool. So it's a way for brands to build up their brand ambassador army, but also consumer discovery just through our platform.
Awesome, Hope. That's wonderful. And we have one more question from Lily. I was wondering if she could talk just a little bit more about the role of AI in curating the content they share. Is it primarily as a means of measuring success of various campaigns?
Yeah, so it's definitely a measurement of success. So looking at if it's shared in social, engagement rate, how is that positive sentiment from people engaging with that content playing out? How does that perform against that brand, but then also that vertical specific benchmark? But we're also doing it to approve that content when it is net new. So we're using machine learning and AI to look at the guidelines that are written in the platform. And it can be, these are terrible examples, but it can be very black and white in terms of, you must wear a turtleneck in your content. You must show, this product in use. So we're using AI to essentially scrape all of those images or videos to say, yes, this meets every single parameter. There's no other brand logos. This looks good. And then it goes to a human, especially for the first few campaigns, to essentially vet that work of the AI. And so that helps us, again, from just a scale and volume perspective. We by no means would be able to employ enough people to go through all of the content. So it also helps us just automate the process and scale the process for content creation. And then it also helps us make creative optimizations to either the guidelines. So the things like, you must wear a turtleneck. It turns out not a single image or video where someone was wearing a turtleneck outperformed our benchmark against engagement rate. Let's take that guideline out and let's go back to the drawing board and do another program. So just little things like that. And then of course, being plugged into any sort of API where there is paid social, that gives us a really clear picture on not just maybe organically how the content performed on the influencers channel, but then also when those assets were repurposed, what of those assets and what about them really worked in a paid perspective, and how does that maybe differ from the organic strategy?
Yeah, I hope. And is there also some sort of, I think there's some sort of AI machine learning component to matching too, right? Like there's like the way they match creators with brands is also helped out by the aid of computers.
Absolutely. It's not only just the matching to say you like basketball, here's a basketball initiative. It's also to say you like basketball and you've opted in to 99% of the campaigns that we've offered you where basketball was an interest or basketball is a keyword. So we're looking at not just the creator and then the brand information, we're also looking at the behavior that that data is driving. If we say, you know, you're tagged for basketball and yet we've surfaced 12 projects for you with basketball in them and you've never opted in, we are taking that and digesting it and knowing that, you know, on campaign number 13 with basketball, we're not going to onboard that creator. Instead, we're going to go after either somebody net new and start to build a different data set around them, or we're going to go after someone through lookalike modeling that mirrors that person that kept turning basketball down and yet has a higher conversion rate for those types of campaigns.
Awesome. Sean has an amazing question, Hope. So let me, we'll do one more and then I'll let you get back to showing the rest of your slides here. But this is a really good question that I think is relevant for everyone. Sean asks, what skills or qualifications, coding experience, et cetera, would be necessary for a PR or communications professional entering this part of the industry?
That is such a good question. Uh, so it's going to vary a little bit just depending on if you're at like a true tech company, if you're in-house at an agency. I would say depending on the coding background that you have, that actually may put you in a better position to get a role at a company that builds code based on that specific skill set. I know for us, when we were doing a big engineering push to hire, we were looking at, and this is a little bit proprietary to Social Native, but I can share, not just somebody's ability to code and not just somebody's ability to maybe have some expertise or experience from a product marketing side within our ad tech bucket, but also how that code was developed. We build all of our code, and and you can probably tell, not an engineer and I don't write code, but I know enough to talk about it from a hiring perspective. So we were looking at individuals who could write code with almost a blocking methodology so that if we build the entire Social Native platform, we acquire another company, we need to be able to build through our code base, basically attachments to that platform potentially. And we also need to be able to unstack them. So oftentimes what actually we saw with a lot of companies when we were going through the exercise of just identifying companies to acquire, a lot of companies' code bases are built very linearly. And so if they want to attach to another API or they want to build another product suite branching off of their code base, in order to do that, you then jeopardize your existing tech stack. And so I would say just understanding the strategy behind the code base that they're working with and kind of the long-term versus the short-term vision are always good questions to ask even in any interview. And it may even inform some of the classes or internships or roles that you want to take, because I think there's definitely an innovative way to write code and build. And then there's kind of the less innovative, the more, I guess it kind of weighs you down in terms of innovation. And so anything, and you guys are already ahead of it because you're in school and you're thinking about it. But anything that informs flexibility in terms of when a new opportunity comes, whether it's a new social platform, a new asset type, even a new category in and of itself, that's going to put you in a really great position. And I think having just coming back to Social Native for us, it was more about the strategy and how the code was written for our engineers. We have plenty of engineers who have never worked in PR, marketing, advertising a day in their life. I'm still explaining to them how brands think and what we do, but really because they are so just impressive with what they challenge us to think about from a consumer, a user, and a tech perspective, we'll hire them all day long, even if they've never been in our category.
Well, let's go the other direction. So I think, so most of my students do not know how to code, Hope. They're not coders. They're probably never going to be coders. So what they do have though, is this skill that you just mentioned, which is understanding communications, understanding organizations, how they're communicating with their publics, understanding social. And so let me just ask you this. Do you know kind of what's the split between non-coding jobs and coding jobs at Social Native in terms of team size, and how many roles are dedicated to non-coders? And then maybe just reframing like those non-coder jobs, what are the softer skills within those, Hope, that these students probably should start thinking about if they wanted to go into technology? Because to your point, you don't code, and you've just, like I've said, you've just like skyrocketed in your career with the skill set that you have.
Yeah, so I absolutely don't write code. I think I know enough about its capabilities to understand as much as the work that I do is primarily brand and strategy, I do spend probably about 20% of my time working with our product team on innovation, on essentially testing what we think fits within our roadmap to have it make sense in market, and challenging them to build things in a different way or think about different data sets that we need to incorporate. So I know just enough about how our tech has been written and what we're capable of and what the market is asking for, and trying to find a middle ground between, pie in the sky, 15 product releases from now, and what can I actually bring back to our market, our clients, in 3, 6 months versus a year and a half. So coming back to Lisa's question, I would say probably 20% of our staff is engineers. The rest are not.
Wow.
Our product team, and this could be interesting too, because I have some former colleagues who, again, not anybody who's ever written code in their lives, but they're sitting on the product teams now because the innovation is there. And so our product and our engineering team, I think, are successful because they're very dynamic and they challenge one another. So one has the product hat, meaning I'm thinking about the end user. I'm thinking about what my product delivers. I'm thinking about how it looks, how it feels. And they're actually the ones designing the platform. If we have a new flow or a new analytics page, they're the ones conceptually understanding how that's going to fit, how it's going to provide value. And then they give essentially a playbook to our engineering team. And that's when the coding takes place. That's pretty much when I step away, but I'm very much involved in kind of the product strategy for what we're building. There's also members of the product team that are just strictly product marketing. So it's their job to arm our internal team with materials, education. When we have a new release, something looks and feels different in the platform, they're responsible for marketing to the immediate social native community, and then also taking that external. So they're educating, informing, maybe hosting webinars, training from a client success perspective for our clients, and then also using that if it's something very innovative, maybe it's something that we have a patent on or we're acquiring a patent on. How do we take that past our immediate customers and now make it a way for us to engage with new brands that we've never worked with in the past?
Yeah, so 80-20, you guys. So 80% of the roles are non-coding. How many employees now are is Social Native at Hope? How many employees do you guys have?
Formal employees, we have 100. And then
Maybe.
offshore, we probably have about 60.
Okay, and and then this will be the last thing, and then I'll let you go on. But I'm sorry, I know that everyone hopefully is interested in this. I know I'm interested in this. When you think about entry level, right? And obviously everyone here, they're looking at graduating soon with their degree in comms. What are some of that 80%, those roles that don't require coding? And I heard you say strategy. And so I'm just going to give a little plug for like every single class that I approach. You all know this if you've had me, I take, and it's like, put on your strategy hat. It's all about objective, target audience, CTA, and you can apply that strategy framework that I teach in every single class to so many things, right? You can apply that strategic framework to something like this, like what Hope's talking about. You can apply it to just, to your personal life. Like I literally do, take a strategic approach to so much of what I do. And that's transferable. It's a transferable skill. Like once you understand how to do strategy, then roles like this you can really sing. So anyway, so what are the skills that you look for, Hope, first from like a group like this when you're trying to hire entry level?
Yeah, I would think about it first on kind of what excites you from your day-to-day work, and it usually can be internal or it can be external. And so what I mean by that is externally facing, and that's the role that I'm in. I'm working with brands and spending a lot of time educating brands or potential partners on what we're doing, but not so much social native, more so around the category as a whole. And so my day to day is probably 80% client or partner facing and 20% internally facing. The internal is when I sit with product, the internal is when I sit with my executive team or other departments on collaboration. And so the client kind of external facing roles can be anything from a sales perspective, so actually drumming up and working with new brands. It could be client success. So that could be after somebody's brought on as a client, your role is really to maybe train them on the platform, train them on the business, how to work together, and ultimately how to make them a successful client long term. We also have external teams that are focused on marketing initiatives, so PR, communication, and their role is to do everything from educating, like I mentioned, our clients to the market as a whole, to coordinating events that we're attending, understanding even, what type of press releases that we want to be doing, maybe helping facilitate some partnerships or some sponsorships where maybe our CEO gets on stage. But that's primarily our externally facing teams. Internally, we have an operations team that works in lockstep with our client success team. So just like our client success team is the ones working with customers, we have an operations team that's working with client success almost as their client to make sure that clients are getting onboarded. Things are set up on the back end of maybe a brand's website to make sure that we can set up collectors for them, or we can put widgets on site. So they're straddling client success as almost their client, but then they're also working with our product, our development, and our engineering teams. So it's a purely internal role, but the perspective from the product standpoint is pretty interesting because you're not only seeing what the client is asking for, you're also internally understanding what our capabilities are, what can we do, and oftentimes our operation team has a lot of the insight or perspective on what should and how be built from a roadmap perspective. And then we have the fun teams like finance, HR, probably a little bit less relevant for this, but I would say probably marketing, client success, sales are definitely the external roles. And then internally, it's more about how do we make our product, how do we make our service, how do we make our teams more impactful.
I love that. And that is such a, it's such a really good way to divide it up, Hope, because, I knew that, you might know this about yourself at this point, all of you that are a little bit younger, you might have a sense on how, like, if you enjoy working with people, if you enjoy working kind of with clients and doing that client communications and being a little bit more outgoing, and rather, are you more of an independent worker? Do you prefer to work, be more on your own? Do you like to kind of get knee deep in stuff? And those are two really kind of different personalities. At least I have found that. And so kind of determining kind of which of those people am I can certainly help you determine if you want to do more of that external role that she just talked about, or maybe you want to do an internal role where your communications background would totally, when you're working on an internal team, communication with your team is really important, and so there's tons of transferable skills there too. So all right, Hope, I'm going to let you jump back in. I know I've been derailing us and we're running low on time, so you take it away and show us the rest of what you got, including that product roadmap which you teased and I really want to see. So
and I'll jump around, but really I think the questions are fantastic, and I think that's a great use of our time. So if there are additional ones, feel free, anybody, to ask. Let me see if it'll let me keep presenting here. And I will just piggyback off of that now, thinking kind of about this group's future roles and organizations. Something that I just learned at a conference I was at, and it was basically 30 different CMOs from our Fortune 500 brands. One of the CMOs shared that her marketing team now has tackled almost a piece of what HR was doing in the past. So how they wanted to be represented as a brand, talking to their internal employees, how they're actually going to be going out and hiring and making those hires through job listings, through onboarding training, and marketing is now taking over a lot of HR's roles, which, high level makes a lot of sense. But I think if anybody here has, an affinity for communications, but then also kind of that company culture piece, I think that could be a really interesting avenue too. And that's something I learned just last Thursday.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so funny. We were just talking about bringing in someone on our faculty to be more focused on internal communications for companies because it's exploding, given it, culture is so important. And so yes, communications professionals are so needed with that company culture and kind of what we call employer brand or internal comms. So that would be a really good niche for anybody who's interested in that, for sure. Huge opportunity there.
Absolutely. So I'll just jump into this, and like I said, Lisa, I'll share this with you to pass along to anybody here. And if you want to spend some time in the deck, have more questions for me, I'm happy to be a resource. Also happy to be a resource if it's just a question about hiring or interviewing or companies, or how you even identify companies that you want to be aligned with or have aspirations to work with. So this is a piece of our roadmap that's coming, and we're in alpha. Actually, we're kind of in beta now with a few clients. And this is our widgets that are on site from brands.com. But instead of having it be a little bit more traditional of kind of rectangle or a square carousel, we're now taking some learnings from Instagram and TikTok specifically to have our widgets and our content be playable and shoppable in the circle format, and then also through essentially the exact aspect ratios of Instagram stories, reels, and TikTok videos. And the idea there is that, and based on our alpha tests, the content that is in this format and content that historically e-commerce and even CMOs would not put on their .com because their .coms are so polished and curated, we're seeing a 5x improvement in performance. So performance could be site time, it could be, uncovering different locations if it's a brick and mortar brand, it could be conversions and actually how much they're spending when they're checking out. But just having content that feels a lot more native and a lot more authentic to how consumers are spending time, and they're spending time in social, that is actually improving e-commerce performance more than what we've ever seen. And I think that that's just a really strong indicator for the brands, and then specifically the companies that you might be looking at from a hiring perspective or where you want to work. If they can be very innovative and quick to not only match what kind of consumers are asking for, and consumers aren't going to raise their hand and tell you what they want, they're going to tell you through their behavior. If you're working for or with a company that pays attention to that behavior and can also think, okay, what is next? What's starting to creep up in terms of where we're seeing ad spend or consumers spend their time? That is always going to be probably a really interesting place to work, and probably a very interesting team to continue to learn from.
Awesome.
Lisa, I can keep going here, or if there's other questions that
keep going.
I'll jump around a little bit again. So I'll go back into here, and I just want to mention, this is what I was talking about with AI and the matching piece, but essentially, and this is a little snapshot of our creator platform, we're using that data set paired with the initiatives for brands to launch their first campaigns with us. But where we become a much more, I think, strategic partner is when we're capitalizing on that feedback loop, where we are taking those learnings and optimizing the content, maybe the creators, and then doing a new batch, whether it's just editing content, maybe it's a different place to put it, or net new creation to inform better learnings over time. And just to give an example, because I know this can be abstract, there's a lot of buzzwords that I try not to use. An example of this was, we were working, and Lisa, you probably know the story, but I still think it's one of the best use cases. A company called Dollar Shave Club, and this was about 5 years ago before they were acquired, but they were known as some of the savviest performance marketers, probably in their D2C vertical. And they worked with us to create content for a new product launch that they were running, and it was a product pack that basically targeted females for the very first time. At that point, they were only, it's shaving, it's toolkits for men. And they said, this is great, we want to test it. We don't have any creative budget or resources to create content for this demo, let alone we don't know how to create content for this demo. And so we said, let's create a campaign, but let's leave the guidelines very broad, which from a brand marketing perspective is very uncomfortable. They're used to giving almost too many guidelines, too many restrictions. So we instead said, let's just take a back seat. Let's let the creators tell us what content they want to create around this product. And let's see what works. And they started using that content in their paid ads. And the targeting was very broad. And they did 8 back-to-back campaigns or projects, where the first one, almost no direction. The second one looked at the performance of that last campaign through AI, and then also some subjective human feedback that we used to basically train our machine for future Dollar Shave campaigns. And we found that the content that was, shocker, shot by females outperformed the content shot by men. They're buying ads for females. That made a lot of sense to us. Wasn't rocket science. So we did it again. This time targeted females within a certain age group that we saw performing best in paid, and then gave them pretty much open creative reins. We did this 6 more times. And what we found by the last brief was content that was shot by females in their bathroom from the knee down. So they did have a human element captured, where a bathtub was visual or could be seen. And then also their toenails were painted, and funny enough, painted red. That was outperforming their benchmark by 3%. And they were doing this on a media buy that was just shy of $1 million. And so we saved them a considerable amount on their CPA, which even if they were spending 100 grand with social native, we essentially became free because the content we were producing made their ad dollars work 3 times as hard. And so they could continue creating content with us through this methodology and process pretty much indefinitely. And so that type of strategy 5 years ago didn't exist. Facebook wasn't pushing content as kind of the way to be competitive in the ecosystem. They were really pushing the targeting, and you needed to be a very savvy media buyer. Now, fast forward to today, they've almost eliminated the need for savvy media buyers completely. Their algorithm does it for you. So now what they're saying is your content better be great, your content better be innovative, and you better refresh it at the frequency that makes sense for your brand to be competitive against anybody else trying to buy ads against that target audience. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just, 5 years ago, we would have never thought that it was going to be the actual assets or the visuals. Now, if you ask me this in 5 years, I'll probably be talking the same way about the UGC images and videos that are being used. So again, just being at a company or a role where you are able to be nimble, you are able to even challenge what you're doing today because you think it's going to make an impact down the road. I think that's always going to be a good place to be.
Yeah, I can't echo that. That's so spot on. I mean, and it's so important to understand that component of it, that this, when you have this type of creative that it resonates, you are saving so much money. It just, and that's the new norm. I mean, you just summed that up so beautifully. And this is what that's why I called your platform the secret weapon. And when Hope and I worked together, we beat all benchmarks. It was a business campaign that we ran. And it beat both consumer and business benchmarks of all the other content that Intel had run. And it was amazingly successful. And we were I feel like, we weren't really ahead of our time, but we kind of were, because I was like, my takeaway from our pilot was like, every campaign at Intel should be doing this, and they would have saved millions of dollars. And now here we are, where it's table stakes. Like, you have to be doing this, to your point. Like, back then Intel was like, what, really? Like, they were so hesitant, but it's like, okay, now here we are. Like, if you're not doing this, you're screwed, basically, right? So anyway, it's an amazing platform, Hope, and I think it's an amazing case use for artificial intelligence, and it hits on so many of the ways, like, it kind of really spans almost your entire stack, how AI and ML enable this type of technology. You couldn't do this without it, frankly, right?
Certainly not with a team of 160 offshore.
No, and it's economical at the end of the day. I mean, that's the other part of it too. I mean, part of this whole case study that is, the creative that we got from Social Native, which outperformed our own content by, I don't know, whatever it was, cost a fraction. So you just, from every angle, it was so expensive to produce those still shots. It was like $10,000 an image or something. I can't remember. It was ridiculous, like how much we were being charged for those. And we were getting them for $500 a piece, right? It's like, oh my God, they're doing so much better. They cost so much less. Like, it's a no-brainer, and anyway, so there's, and I think now it's like with doing video and adding the different assets and the shopping widgets, it's just using all of that to really help brands, connect more with their audiences in an amazingly smart way that scales, Hope. So yay. Any final questions? I want to be mindful of time. It's 2:58. Where does the time go? It's 2:58. Any final questions? I've got one more question in chat, Hope, and then we'll wrap this up. So this is from Justin. Just a general question. How do you keep up with today's trends, or do you stay away from being trendy due to the fact trends die out? Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
That is a good question. There's probably trends that I still haven't kept up with, but I just try and be a sponge, and I try and ask a lot of questions. And I don't just ask questions to my team. I don't ask questions only to my peers or former coworkers. I ask to clients, and I always want to know what brands are doing or what marketers are doing that I'm not thinking about. And so something that I'm pretty notorious for, and this is probably where my product hat comes into play, is I will ask anybody and anyone that's meeting with me, what, if you take Social Native out of the equation, of course I work for Social Native, what's your biggest focus? What's the hardest thing that you have to tackle this year? What is the thing that you're going to be most proud of when you get to go to your senior leadership or your manager or another team with the organization that you tackled? And knowing what keeps my clients or even more partners up at night tells me that that's a problem that needs to be solved. And that's probably not a problem that is unique to them. So as I start to see similar problems coming up, or I start to see different air quote solutions that maybe aren't solving that problem come up, I dive headfirst into them, and I want to read and understand how that fits into not only my work at Social Native, but I think the bigger ecosystem. And I think what has made myself, but more so Social Native, successful is we never look directly at our competitors. We never look directly at our partners. We try and think much bigger in terms of what we deem our category or our bucket or our vertical, to see, what are other companies that are maybe adjacent to us doing that's really interesting. And that's how the Olympic acquisition happened. They weren't ever a competitor. We never heard their name other than maybe doing some interviews and hiring some of their staff. But they were innovating with UGC in a completely different way. And, as over time, our verticals started to emerge, and now we're seeing acquisitions that are very similar in structure and capability happening pretty frequently. So it's a long-winded way of just saying, ask all the questions. I would say think a little bit bigger than your immediate kind of focus or preview. And, I think staying connected with people that you either go to school with or work with long-term, you're going to be really surprised where many people on this call end up. And that can even just be a tipping point to more questions to ask and more to learn.
One more question for Hope, and thank you. So I remember working with you when going to that Santa Barbara conference. Oh my gosh! And you're so smart. You're so dialed in. I share with the students. My question is, what personal traits do you feel have really served you to go from that, what I'm going to call green person that I met 10 years ago, or however long ago, it feels like 10 years ago, to now when you're VP of Global Sales, and you just are so coming into your power and your own Hope. You're such an inspiration, frankly, right, for these students. What are the skills that have got you from there to here, and that you really feel these students could start to hone? I mean, you were always an overachiever and a go-getter, but what from your perspective, what do you think did it for you?
I think, one, because I'm at a startup, being really agile. So things are going to change overnight, and not being shaken when a complete team structure is blown up, or when the product doesn't work, or it doesn't work because of X, or the platform has now changed their terms of service and you have to pivot. I think being able to take a step back and see big picture, that this is a small hiccup, I'm going to learn from it, and being comfortable with that has worked really well. My CEO notoriously says that he tries daily to upset me or stress me out or fluster me, and he has yet to do it. And it's been 4 years. And if you know him, that's a little crazy. So I think just seeing big picture and not being rattled by little things will help, especially as things start to change very rapidly. And then I also think, not, and this is partially why I love startups, but not going with the status quo. So I think I'm lucky that I'm at an organization where if I have an idea, someone on my team has an idea that's wildly different than anything we've done, I will bring that to light and challenge it all day long and try and implement it and learn from it. But I'm not going to bring ideas that I don't believe have some level of backing in data and expertise. And so what I mean by that is I am an open book in terms of ideas from my team, but I'm going to challenge them, and I'm going to challenge our clients. Some of our best clients, I'm the person that gets on the phone, ask them why they're working with us, ask them why something's not turned on, ask them why they haven't done this. But that dialogue and that mentality to challenge and think a little bit differently, I think goes a very long way. And I think this group here, you probably have more ideas than I have, even if we're talking only about social or communication, because you're in it and you are that kind of next generation that's going to have the brilliant ideas, that's going to build the things that I can't imagine, candidly. So I think just being, somebody with a big perspective that isn't just looking at your immediate day to day, and then also being really open to change has helped a lot.
Oh my God, that's amazing advice. Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you so much. Everyone give Hope a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Hope. It was so lovely having you in, and I know this was really valuable. And do send me the deck. Justin, do you have another question?
Yes. Do you have any favorite Twitter brands?
Twitter brands.
I like Wendy's, Wingstop, and Aunt Annie's.
I was gonna say Wendy's. They are quick and they are on top of it. They're also a client, but their engagement strategy, I think, is huge. I will say, and this may not be still as relevant, but Southwest was doing a phenomenal job when they had very upset customers. They had things getting grounded, and they were hilarious in their commentary back to their followers. But they were also professional when, I'm just going to throw them under the bus. American Airlines won't even get back to you if you email them directly. So they used social, I think, as a way from a client success perspective and a consumer engagement that it's still brilliant.
I love it. Awesome. Thanks for the question, Justin. Okay, well, thank you again. I will be talking to you soon, and send over the deck and I'll share it with everyone. And don't hesitate. So generous of you to offer to give more advice or answer more questions offline, Hope. So I really appreciate that. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Absolutely. And Lisa, I'll make sure you have the deck, and then everybody has my contact info, or message me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there too.
Awesome. Thank you.